day?
Well, we started the day at 6:15 doing a conference with FIFA. They're trying to get the World Cup in Nashville. So that was an interesting one.
That's cool. I started
We're good. Yeah. All right, I apologize to everybody for being a little tardy. We'll call the budget meeting to order. Mr. Mendon, if you don't mind, sir, you've only got a few more of these left in you, if that's okay.
Right. Yes, sir. Well, I'll need to continue this. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for its many blessings. Thank you, dear God, for your Son Jesus, in whom we have all hope. Thank you for your watch care over us through the night, through the day to day. Pray, dear Lord, that you would help each of us to make the right decisions for this county, decisions that would bring you the most honor and glory. Thank you, dear Lord, for that we do live in this county, and we believe one of the very best in the nation. Pray, dear Lord, your help here tonight. We'll be mindful to forever give you the praise. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Mendon. Entertain motion for approval of the agenda. Yep. And when we do, we'd like to set item F under report of the finance director, and it's just going to be established in the calendar for next year.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Again, is anything on the budget committee that passed unanimously waives the 2 readings required? Recognition of public will always do like we always do. If someone's got a question or wants to say something, just kind of raise your hand. We'll get to you as we come along the topics. Approval of the minutes, I so move.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Miraculously, the minutes pass unanimously, so we can move on. My report. We have a full agenda tonight. We've got a lot of guests and visitors. Trying to be respectful of everybody's time. This is also stuff that we do need to talk about, and it's going to come up, so I apologize for what might be a little bit longer meeting than usual, but I think there's some amazing things we've got on here. So with that, I was privileged enough to be a part of a workforce development group that Forward Sumner was heading up, and they were doing that through a grant from the state, which, if you know how it usually works, you get a grant to do the planning, and then you don't really know how you're going to pay for it. Well, this one, hopefully, we've kind of figured that part out. We'd like to think. The workforce development part, and I'm going to defer to Mike Cross in a second and Jimmy, but just so you understand what we're trying to do was one of the things we've been missing forever in our county is that connection between taking kids their junior year to that senior year to the first, second year of community college to TCAP, whatever it might be. We know that path for kids going from high school to a 4-year degree is pretty established. But what happens is some of us remember when you were younger, they gave you those tests, hey, what are you interested in, what should you do? And then some of us like me were a janitor or a cook on there, so you just kind of roll with it. Well, this hopefully takes it that next step, and it's actually going to be, and I'm not doing it justice, but just so we kind of all understand, the idea is to have a program that in Sumner County is going to be the first part, and I will brag on this part. Our county, we say over and over how amazing it is. Well, we're in a position because of the relationship between our school system, volunteer state community college, TCAT, and everything else we have. We're able to do it where a lot of counties in the state can't because they don't have an agreement. They can't get along. They can't sit in the same room. And so with that being said, Mike, you going to go first or Jimmy? Jimmy, you go ahead. Yes, sir.
I'll introduce Mike Cross. Thank you, Chairman. With us tonight is Mike Krause. He's a personification of an adult learner. Chris was just talking about 3 tours in Iraq, Army Aviation, an adult learner. The military sent him to college at 28. He's now a graduate of Austin Peay and with a master's from Vanderbilt. He was the first director of Drive to 55 under Governor Haslam. This is where Tennessee Promise and Reconnect came from, the tuition-free programs. Then he became the executive director of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, where he won the state director for the nation. But then just recently he made a career change where he became a rainmaker for the Bradley Law Firm in Nashville, and to work with communities like ours on alignment and implementation of education to work programs. So Mike and also should mention that his firstborn Max is with him tonight.
Civics lesson. Thank you for the introduction, Jimmy. I couldn't help but mention
that, first off, it was fun to work on this project because, Chris, your leadership and others. It was also really fun because the very first kickoff meeting we ever held for Tennessee Promise was in Sumner County. And some of y'all might remember that. I know Mayor Holt does. I think several of you were there. There's an interesting perspective when you leave government and go in the private sector. For me, I wanted to try to solve problems I saw when I was in government, because the reality is government's just never going to be able to move as fast as the private sector. And what that has looked like is working in communities across the state, but also nationally, around this problem that Chris referenced, which has become a little bit intractable, which is we have really good high school systems in place. We have really good higher education systems in place. In theory, though, they should both be pointing towards one destination, which is employers and industry. We don't always do a great job at that. What's exciting is we come to you, we're going to frame up a few challenges, but we've got solutions. And that's what came out of this work. So a few things. First, we could have had this conversation before the pandemic. I would tell you this is now directly both exacerbated and related to the pandemic. So our economist working with this team estimates that Sumner County lost $573 million in personal income in the last 18 months, which would have been equivalent probably to the loss of personal income normally over a decade of decline. It happened in 18 months. So just know everything we're talking about this evening is nested within the reality of a pandemic and recovering from a pandemic. And that was how we framed up our discussions. We're about 8 weeks in. It was every other week. It was a group that I would have given Jimmy and Ford Sumner credit. He didn't let us get too existential. And that's easy to happen with these things, right? People start doing the airing of grievances. Jimmy kept us focused on how do we take a student in this county and make sure that when they're in high school, what they're doing in career and technical education lines up with what they need to do in higher education, which lines up with getting a job. And that sounds really simple. It's incredibly complicated. And as Chris referenced, there are some counties you couldn't do that. You couldn't, again, one, the leaders don't talk, and you don't have leaders that already have a real foundation. So let's talk about that really quickly. Sumner County CTE, again, working statewide and nationwide on CTE issues, best in class, without question. The CTE pathways in the high schools in this county are incredibly strong, and they're really career focused. On the other side of the equation, Volunteer State Community College. Most of the associate degree programs and technical certificate programs there, a lot of their first year starting wages that we reviewed are actually higher than if you would have gotten a bachelor's degree. So we have two educational institutions doing the right thing. What we sensed, though, over the course of this conversation was that, one, we hadn't put in place the linkages in the wake of a pandemic to really come alongside students and help them understand what's possible. So think of high school students. There's really three kinds, and the data bears this out. First off, Sumner County has a whole lot of this group, high flyers. They're going to college. They were always going to college. That is inevitable. And we love that, right? That's great. They are going to take AP. We love that too, the advanced placement courses, right? The second kind of student. The second kind of student is the one that worries me moderately, because they're drifting. And why I love career and technical education for those students, first off, by the way, CTE is not shop class anymore. It was shop class when I was in high school. CTE now is advanced manufacturing, information systems, healthcare, law enforcement, which we'll talk about in a moment. When you're in CTE, our hope is you catch one of those drifting students and you light a fire. And then they suddenly see some possibilities. The third type of student is the one I worry the most about. It's in a drifting student whose parents didn't go to college. Their parents may not actually be in the workforce currently, and so they don't have any models. And that student either doesn't enroll in CTE or they're a dabbler, right? They go because, they have to be in school. It's the law. We want to capture that third student because that third student is very likely to do nothing after high school. We're not even sure if they'll enter the workforce. They definitely won't be contributing in a meaningful way to the tax base that you all have to think about. So that was the framework. We sat down thinking about how do we take a great school system, a great college, a great employer ecosystem, and meld these all together. We came away with a couple conclusions that kind of informed, I think, the discussion and the ask here. First, what do we really need in Sumner County right now? We had, I will tell you, one of the best data economists I've ever known, Rupa Deloach. And Rupa sat down and did an economic assessment of this area that, again, there's not a more sophisticated one done in New York City. This is as sophisticated a labor market analysis as can be performed. And we saw a couple of trends. One, information systems going to the moon. There's no doubt about it that if a student is willing to focus on computer science, they're going to have a great career here in Sumner County. Also, there's this other interesting post-pandemic thing, which is we may get them to make it home in Sumner County and they can work anywhere remotely. Second, healthcare. It's growing, it's going to continue growing. We have an aging population issue that is causing all of us to rethink what healthcare looks like. This is another growth industry. The third one that presented us, I think, a really interesting pathway. We know we'll always have a need for it. What I liked about it is there's nobody else doing this. And that is putting in place a meaningful law enforcement pathway in high school. So, and certainly the chairman can back me up on this. People enter law enforcement much the same reason I entered the military. It's a calling. You feel like you want to serve. We typically have done a really bad job of being able to show students that pathway in high school, though. So what do people think their path to being a police officer is? A lot of times they think it runs through the military. Doesn't need to, right? We can find a student in high school and link them up with a meaningful law enforcement career. And the coolest thing about this initiative is it's directly linked with your county, because your sheriff has already stepped up. And there's already a career technical ed pathway where you can graduate from high school really with a virtual assurance, provided you hold up your end of the bargain, of being able to enter the sheriff's office. Those are the three pathways we really honed in on. Please don't hear me exclude other pathways. There are. But in the wake of this pandemic, something I'm encouraging any community I'm working with is don't boil the ocean. If we try to do 10 career technical pathways, we'll do 10 of them really poorly. Let's do 3 really well. What does doing 3 pathways really well look like? Over our discussions, it became apparent, and I want to recognize Nick, who's here from Volunteer State Community College. Nick Bishop does a great job. Most community colleges don't have a Nick Bishop. And so that was really good foresight of Dr. Faulkner previously, and now Dr. Montague, to empower Nick to be sitting in a room and say, yeah, Vol State can do that. And so as our discussions opened, and I don't want to speak for you, Nick, I was blown away by what K-12 is doing. K-12, I think, was blown away by what Vol State's doing. Those conversations are happening. We have to translate those conversations into student-facing conversations. I don't need Nick to go get a CTE credential. Nick knows those opportunities are out there. We need to be able to reach out and connect and navigate students, which is the verb you will see in the request. We're looking to put in place boots on the ground as a connector, navigator in the workforce community. What does that look like? First off, it means they're acquainted with what the workforce needs. Probably our best participants over these last couple of months were the employers. And kudos to Facebook, who was there nearly every meeting. John, where are you? We had 2 other business reps there every single meeting. What we heard from the business reps, by the way, was very complimentary of, I think, both schools. But we also heard from the business reps, we got to keep pushing here, right? Because the reality is Sumner County has something most counties would kill for, which is an economic growth curve that looks like that. That's also a challenge, though. And it can be temporary if you don't have the workforce to fill it. So what came out of all of these deliberations, I think, was the recognized need by all parties. We've got to have somebody navigating this. It's an air traffic control role. It's also a role that I can discern is not present in other counties. I think without question it will be emulated across the state. I think it'll probably be emulated nationally, because there's a lot of counties in this country sitting at tables just like this trying to figure out where do we stand right now, because most of the realities we've been thinking about societally and economically for the last 40 years have changed. And I think that was apparent throughout all of our conversations. The last thing I want to say about the workforce, we've got to push them too, okay? And that's something that I think this position will really help us move the needle on. One thing sometimes employers have been guilty of is saying, hey, we need people that can show up knowing what they want to do and knowing how to function in a workplace. And then when we say, great, can you help us with some apprenticeships? They've typically backed away from the table and said, I can't have them, on my shop floor during the day, all that liability. Again, I want to commend the group. We heard especially the construction industry being wide open here, saying, no, we want them in the facilities. We heard several of the employers say, Jimmy, if you'll tell us how many placements you need, we'll do it. But we really can't get there, I think, unless there is somebody being able to answer that question empirically and being able to answer that question with both the volunteer state side, the CTE side, and then ultimately knitted together with somebody that can get a good job, raise a family here in Sumner County. It's been exciting work. Would love to take your questions. I would say we started off with no preconceived destination in mind. We ended up at a place where I truly think Sumner County has a shot to do something nobody else in the state is doing. And it would be an important example to a lot of other counties who are facing some of the very similar workforce challenges, but maybe don't have the economic opportunities we have here.
And just to kind of explain a little bit more, what we're looking at, and don't sit down, Mike, is hand-holding, for lack of a better word, that takes a student from 11th grade, and it's through digitized technology, more than likely an app, because everybody has a phone, that's how everybody does anything, and that's how most things are done, that sits on there and says, hey, what kind of, it's a little bit of a financial planner. It says, if you want to drive this kind of car, you have to make this much money. If you want to live in this type of house, so that way they have a baseline. And then from there it says, okay, if you want to have that kind of money, this is the kind of career you need. And they can choose from different career paths. So they can say, okay, I only want to be in school for a year. Great, here's the opportunities that are presented to you through either TCAT or different things. He mentioned Sheriff Weatherford. Gallatin High School has a program where they certify jailers in one semester. So at the end of their senior year, they're ready to go. The same thing with EMTs. I've already talked to Chief Miller about it. He wants to plug that in through Vol State. And what we're saying is you help a kid where you say, hey, what do you want to do based on how much money you want to make, how long you want to go to school to get ready for that career. And then it plugs them into these three categories to start with, takes them along that path, and that's where staff is helping them navigate that difference, and you have to. We've seen it with the Tennessee Promise and everything else. I'm a mentor with that, and there's kids that, the 4-year kids, I mean, they're all over it. The kids that aren't sure, if you're not helping them do their stuff, making sure that they've met the requirements of the community service and everything else, they're not going to get it done. So there's a group that you have to help. That's the group we want to target. Then it takes it the next step further. Okay, you've gone to school for 1 year. You liked it, you were successful at it. Maybe you want to change and do a different career path or something a little bit more extended. You went for the EMT program. Man, I really like that. I want to do a paramedic. Okay. And this helps them along the way. And then this is where it's so important for industry. A lot of times you'll have, and Nick can tell us, certifications after they finish school, but it's not really the right certification to get a job that they want based on our industry. And I'll pick on Scott in a little bit to have him talk about the Music City. But what happened was, this way you've got businesses on the front end saying, you know what, I want this in an employee. A great recruiting tool, by the way, for workforce development. I want this in an employee. Okay, you put it in our app, and now all of a sudden it's an option for kids. And when he was talking about the data that Rupa was pounding on, she literally said, hey, construction needs 530 jobs this year. There's only 310. There's a gap of 190, whatever it might be. And she did that for all these different spots. We know there's jobs for people, and we know there's people without jobs, and part of it was 16 to 24 is a large group of kids that never work and haven't seen that example. This is more than just trying to place kids in things. It's a workforce development, but more importantly, it helps kids to go towards a career where they can support a family, they can stay in Sumner County, and these are jobs that are in Sumner County we attract back to Sumner County. So it's an amazing idea that you would almost say, hey, it's too much. And I credit Jimmy and Mike and Nick and everybody. They've figured out a way to do it where it's actually really simple.
And it's a non-recurring investment with a recurring benefit, which I think as we all think through ARPA and the landscape we're looking at with an influx of funds, I think it's one of those things that 12 months later a community says, how do we not have this all the time?
It's a way for kids. We talk about what a great place Sumner County is. People grow up here. They leave, they want to come back and raise a family here. This helps people find those jobs to stay in Sumner County. So, Scott, did you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I think I don't want to take too much time because
No, you're fine.
Mike is way better, and way more well versed in this than I am. First, just to echo Mike, Nick is really amazing. He's been a great partner for us at Ball State. And if you ever get a chance, if you have no idea the programs that exist at Ball State, I mean, you know, Facebook comes to town, they're having trouble getting people certified in the construction technology that they need to build the facility. Ball State creates a licensure program for them. I mean, it's rolling like that, and that's creating jobs for people here locally very quickly. It's really pretty, I mean, Chris asked me to talk a little bit about Music City Studios. I was blown away. If you've read in the newspaper, City of Hendersonville has a $100 million investment. I mean, a man grew up in Nashville, went to college in Loyola, ran music festivals all over the world, and the pandemic hits, and he looks around and says, you know what? The music industry has about 5 main prongs, and they're all siloed off. None of them communicate with each other. We need to create a space for them to creatively collide and work together and completely transform the music industry like we've seen in the movie industry. They chose Hendersonville, Tennessee to do that, which is, again, speaks volumes about Sumner County and the city of Hendersonville. It's very exciting for our county and for the city, but to imagine that, they're going to be making things like part of the next Star Wars movie in Hendersonville is really pretty exciting. But beyond that, like what he said is when he was in high school, he went to MBA and he got thrown out of 20 music studios in Nashville because he wanted to see what a studio was like before he went to college. And they didn't let teenagers. So he said, I can promise you, I've got $100 million in financing, got 60% occupancy already. He said, I can promise you we're going to be open for internships, externships, everything, because I want kids to know and have the opportunities that I didn't. And I think we're seeing, Chris mentioned that a little bit, we're seeing that a lot across all of our industries. We've been working on, because I think, Mike mentioned the effects of the pandemic. What we're seeing the effect, I can at least say for high school students, and I suspect through early 20s, is where I think most of us grew up with, here are the boxes I've got to check to be successful in life and my career. I'm going to go to high school, then I'm going to go to the Army. I'm going to go to high school, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go to high school, I'm going to go to police academy. All these things. Well, kids don't check those boxes anymore. Kids get engaged in things because they're interested in, they really have much more of a calling aspect of how they want to devote their lives. And we've got to tap into that. And we tap into that by providing them real world experience to see what's out there. Mike mentioned the third kind of student that they're aiming for. There are a lot of those students. Like one of the things, we're working on a heavy construction pathway now. Westmoreland High School has, they're the closest to being able to integrate it. But for instance, if you talk to road pavers, any heavy industry right now, they'll tell you that they're losing 4 heavy machinery operators and only getting 1 back. Nobody's going into that field. The starting salary for a lot of those is around $70,000 or $80,000 a year with full benefits. Like there are so many opportunities out there for our kids in early 20s, and we've got to get them connected in. And just the other thing, in addition to like Music City Studios, was amazingly impressive. I thought equally impressive was touring the program that Ball State has built. Steve Bashir's won 5 Grammys in gospel music and other areas, and it's on Ball State's campus is recording an orchestra in London, having it transmitted to Ball State's campus. He and his students are working on it. Then they're sending it to LA to be dubbed into a Netflix series. It's amazing how universal or global everything is becoming, and that's going to be the norm moving forward. So I think as we've thought on the school side about how to use funding strategically to not, because I can tell you what's happening in a lot of places around the country. They're dropping I can show you my emails sometimes. We get bombarded with vendors every day that have some kind of technology or something. You spend that money on a recurring basis, and then about 2024, 2025, when the ESSER or the COVID money runs out, there's going to be a huge bubble that's going to burst. We've tried to say, how can we invest in things that prepare our students longer term? And I think those are the kind of investments strategically that we need to think about. What can we put in place to connect so that we're continuing to build, draw companies. Think, for instance, Facebook. I think when the first building is built, Facebook will be the second biggest industry taxpayer in Sumner County. When the second building is built, it'll be these are really good, high-paying jobs that are moving to the county, helping us. Yeah, number one then, helping to lower the tax burden on residential homeowners. And these are things that we can do, we're quickly becoming a hub for these type of industries. And, Chris and Mike mentioned the way our cities and county are working together now. We've got some real strategic opportunities. So I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Scott. Y'all know I'm overly dramatic and I'm nerdy about this stuff, but what we're gonna ask for, and I'll make the motion so we can get the discussion rolling and questions. We wanna do 1.5 million of our ARP money. The way it's been written up, it's based on unemployment related to COVID, and we do it. I'm gonna ask the motion that we fund 1.5 million of the ARP money for this. They've got a budget built out, which we can explain about it, with the idea that David and I think Mayor Holt are meeting with the accountants next week?
The consultants.
Next week.
Next week.
And we're gonna run through the different programs we've got. Obviously, if this doesn't fall under that criteria, it's something different. We'll have to come back and talk about a different funding source. But I'd like to pass this contingent upon the fact that the accounting firm says that it's applicable and we can do that, so that way we can get moving forward on it, at least at some point close to the commission, so.
That would bring it in January.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry.
That would bring it to the commission in January.
Mhm. So, discussion and anybody, I mean, Mike, Scott, any of us, any questions, guys? I know y'all gotta have some.
Let me say this, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Fort Sumner has done an amazing job. I remember we applied a year ago for this 3-star money. We got awarded this grant. We got awarded this year. And now we're building it into something that is going to be a model. I can't tell you the number one obstacle for economic development right now is workforce. And if we can solve this problem, we can crack this nut, we're gonna be wildly successful, beyond, our imagination. The start of Music City Studios or Facebook or anything else, we will become a hub, and Nashville already is, of economic development, but we're gonna be a large player. And I can't thank Jimmy enough, and you, Mr. Chairman, Mike, you, Nick, all the people who participated, because it's been amazing. And I think we've got a rare opportunity, and we're ahead of the curve. So I think this is money well spent. We're gonna have to market this right to make sure that these funds are applicable to this application, which I think they are, because this is a direct response to what this pandemic has done to not only our nation, our state, and our county, and this is a great way to come out a winner in the end. That's all I want to say.
Questions, anybody?
Mr. Chairman, we'll send this to the consultant.
Okay. Mr. Witt?
I have a question, and I don't want to go way into the weeds, but just kind of at a high level, we're talking about digitizing, creating an app that is rolled out to our high schoolers. And then you kind of touched on this, but I just was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, you know, the connecting and navigating. We're talking about working with high school counselors to further connect this resource to their thought process and their decision making, so that it's more of a one-on-one, hands-on with individual students. That's the end game, if I understood it right.
Let me try, Commissioner. First thing I would say is the workforce, first thing the Fort Sumner Board of Directors certainly did this work. But the workforce cabinet, I just want to emphasize, and there's a letter of support from the workforce cabinet in the application tonight. But the members of that is the president of Volunteer State Community College, the director of schools, Dr. Phillips, the interim president of TCAT Nashville, because they had a death at that position, the Northern Workforce Board Chairman, the Workforce Essentials, Marla Rye, executive director of that board. That Workforce Board has something called Chief Elected Official that covers 13 counties. In this case, it happens to be our own Sumner County Mayor, and then the private sector too. So I just want to frame it in that the Workforce Cabinet is, they're the ones that are doing all these great things. The connector, the community navigator, is really just to blur those lines so that we take it, connect all the good work that they're doing. Because what happens, they just stop at their own boundaries. I mean, the school system is paid to educate their own schools, their own students, the same way Volunteer State is, same way TCAT is. So that community navigator is putting those systems. You sit on the Career and Technical Education Advisory Council. Mr. Foster that used to sit on that council. We created it some years ago. We've had a lot of these discussions, but it's all inside what can some kind of schools do. And what we would like for that to happen beyond that, this is an opportunity to build that system out.
I would add, to kind of see where you're getting at, going back to something that the chairman said earlier, we have the best K-12 system in the state of Tennessee, in my opinion. We have a really great higher ed system. But what we need help with is somebody to take the students, but also the parents and the family, and say, these are your 3 best career opportunities in Sumner County, and help plug them into those opportunities on that pathway. That's the part that we have missing. They're trying to educate kids, we're trying to educate, counsel, and feed people, but it's getting them to that point on that best pathway, knowing what those pathways are, and that's what we've really been able to do in this cabinet, is lay out those pathways, and then help those students, but also educate their parents to help make that decision as a unit, to plug them into those pathways, and that's what's missing right now.
And I think that's the hardest change, because, you know, if you're like my family, like my grandfather dropped out in 8th grade. His greatest accomplishment was putting his 4 kids through college. Like, we had an old way of thinking that going to college, getting a 4-year degree was the right way, but now there are so many different pathways. It's more helping a kid find what's right for them, whether that's an 18-month program or a 4-year program or a 2-year program. You know, because I mean, like, you know, Mr. Duffer at Westmoreland, Principal Westmoreland, will tell a story about one of their kids got a welding certification. He stayed in high school so he could weld, and I think now he's making about $160,000 a year running his own welding company. You know, like, college wasn't for him. The best thing for him is he wanted to learn how to run a business, and he wanted to learn how to weld, and that's worked out beautifully for him.
You're exactly right, Scott, and we tend to categorize students into 2 categories. You go to college, complete college, you're successful. You don't, you're not successful. But that's not true at all.
Not the case.
Because many people, my son for one, my daughter graduated college, it's great, she's doing great. My son went on and got certified as an electrician, he's doing great. It wasn't his interest. He had a passion for working with his hands. He didn't want a desk job. Not that all college degrees are desk jobs, but I think what we're doing is we're utilizing our talent. We cannot afford anymore to waste the talent we have, because the job market is so tight and there's such a demand for workers. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm on a hospital board. I'm on Sumner Regional Hospital Board. We are looking at a crisis in healthcare workers. If we cannot get people trained as nurses and healthcare providers, we're going to have a crisis. The population, people like me, the boomers, are aging out. They're gonna need healthcare. And you've got this pandemic with nurses dropping out because they're fatigued out and they're at wit's end. And we've got to do something about it. And I think this is a great way to address that issue. And I think it's different, but that's what I like about it, because we put a lot of people together. We're taking these individual silos, and they've been there forever, and utilizing them, and then bringing them together so we can coordinate our activities. And that's never been done. It really has never been done.
Any discussion, Jerry?
I don't know Mike, I've never met him, but excellent presentation. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm a high school teacher, criminal justice teacher at Beat, so I concur with exactly what you're saying. I see a lot of students all the time that don't know what they want to do after high school. You're exactly right. The people that know where they're going know, and they're on that path already. If you guys remember, most of us are, certainly I am, old enough to remember before Indian Lake was here, and our students and our children and a lot of our families took jobs in Davidson County because there was nothing here. And Sumner County is known for its quality of life, and it's also known for its school system. That's what builds good neighborhoods. And if we can keep our students here, it'll even make our neighborhood even better and a better place to live if we can give our students opportunities. They want to stay here. I know they did. Most of them did want to stay here because Sumner County is a great place to live. So I commend you for your efforts and really look forward to it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thanks, gents.
Chairman, may I ask?
Yes, sir, Mr. Hinton.
I didn't hear much discussion about folks that was already out of high school, but out here and got a nickel job and worked it
That
2
is
years.
actually the go ahead, Mike.
Did I overlook it?
No, sir, that's a part of it too.
No, sir, it's funny, I was about to say it, but I got taught a long time ago, if you got the vote, stop talking. So, there's no pipeline we've discussed right now that, one, won't be applicable to adult learners, and two,
Okay.
I don't view this effort as being solely focused on K-12, but here's an example. So, the main challenge adult learners the main challenge adult learners face is adult learners do not want to go to college, they want to get a better job.
Yeah.
There's a messaging difference there. Now, to get a better job, what do you have to do sometimes? Go get a certification, which may be in a college. These pathways that we've just laid out,
Okay,
there's some transparency there that I think adult learners will benefit from.
good, thank you.
And that's the goal. Go ahead, Mo.
Do we have any idea of the backlog at TCAT Corbin of adult learners trying to get in? From what I understand, it was at least 20-something in the welding program on a waiting list.
Go ahead.
I
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I think it depends on the program. I think welding is, I think there's some you could walk up there and get in next semester, but I think the welding one, I'll find out about that. I'll ask about
And
that.
it,
They have a day and night
Yeah.
class.
Yeah, just started tonight, class, we gotta address that, Mr.
thank you, Mo. No, that's a great point though, Mo, because doing this, we'll find out what we need to do more of.
A lot of
Yeah.
areas, the kids in Westmoreland also go to Hartsville after school program. And we have a lot of students that graduate Westmoreland and go over to Hartsville for
Mhm.
nursing, their CNA programs and
Yeah.
different things. And I just don't want to see people get discouraged by not being able to get into a program somewhere and take one of those jobs that, just
Yeah.
go to work, so maybe they can get into something quicker in, one of these other places.
I think one of the things we gotta do too is get some kind of career counseling for that age group too. Because, I know like sometimes the TCAT, there may not be an opening in Portland, but there may be one in Springfield or Hartsville. And it's just getting, but like, Trent just said, that group is discouraged easily. We need to find ways to get them connected in and aligned. It's hard, once they get out of our walls, it's harder to pull them back in, but we gotta find a way to be able to do that.
Actually, in Portland, the welding class was looking for another location.
Uh-huh.
Already a building that could be compatible. I don't think they ever
We're just gonna
found.
make a request that they give some portion of their budget and we'll wait for them to come back.
On the library one, I'll just make it real quick. We're asking the library board, we had met with them, had some discussions about how they were doing things, and we're gonna ask, David and I are asking them for some follow-up information related to their salary study. They were getting with Miss Cheryl, our HR director now, to try and figure that part out, so we're just gonna have them follow up with us on it. And then the last part of my report, we've talked about over the past 5 years, we've tried to struggle with how we're going to do rural fire protection. We've looked with CTAS, it's helped us look at a lot of different models. We've kind of come up with our own, which is our volunteer fire, working with our municipalities. We've done a permanent revenue source for the rural fire in the tax base. And the next part was they do a good job of working through and raising funds to kind of get the day-to-day needs met. They are really struggling with their heavy equipment. I met with all of the fire chiefs this summer and had them prioritize for us what they need. And we were going to kind of wait until the spring to start slowly replacing their big equipment because they're never going to raise $300,000 to do that. And that, if we know that's who's going to be putting out fires, they need to have the appropriate equipment, especially when it doesn't work. And that's what's come to roost. Mr. Driver called me. I've been talking with Highland Fire Department. They have 3 pieces of equipment. All 3 were out at one point. They put $15,000 into one of them, got it running, but the mechanic told me, he's like, that's for today. It very well could go out tomorrow. So I'm asking if we could please step the process up. And what that's going to be is Mr. Line came up and Ms. Denham had to discuss how we could legally buy them things and it not come back to bite us in the butt. So what we're going to do is in the spring request to move temporarily 2 pennies from debt service to general for the task of doing volunteer fires heavy equipment. The only reason I'm bringing it up right now is Highland needs to order theirs. It's about an 8 to 9 month return before they'll get it. They don't have to pay until they get it. But if we wait until spring to order it, then now it's a year and a half before they get it, and there's no way they'll make it that long. We know that. So I'm just going to make the motion that we plan to move that money in the June, whenever it would be when we set the tax rate, so that they can move forward on at least ordering that equipment. So it'll be in time, probably late summer, but they'll at least have it. So, I mean, just, and it's, like I said, we've discussed this on, gosh, we beat it to death on EMS, we've talked about it here in different places, but I think we've kind of all come to consensus that's, we're gonna support our rural fire, so, that's my motion.
2 cents from debt service.
Debt service for 1 year.
Temporarily reallocated, give
Yeah.
them about $1.3 million.
Yeah, and the reason being is debt service is obviously sales tax. We've had a good year sales tax, we're not saying we've had a good year property tax, so there's,
It's pretty good too, it's good too.
yeah, well, it's not good enough to pull 1.2
No.
million out, so.
But we have enough reserves that it's fine to take it out for 1 year and we'll still be in good shape.
And again, it'll be obviously only for the volunteer fire for their heavy equipment, so when we go there. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes,
Go
sir.
into a detail of what we're, can I go into details of what we're gonna request from the libraries, because there's been some
Yep,
questions.
yeah, David's gonna,
What I've been asked is by Commissioner, and maybe actually two, is the library boards have become one system and they started moving their salaries around.
brainstorm.
I think what we would like to
And he's
request
allowed
from the
to this
library
time.
board is they show us what the original salaries look like and where they've adjusted all the different salaries, what the individuals are making and all the adjustments, and bring it back to budget next month. I think that's the request.
And Miss Cheryl, again, is helping them with that, so we can kind of make sure that it makes sense and is done properly.
If the committee's good with that, I'd like to make a request to get the information
Yeah,
from.
no, we're good, yeah. Mr. County Mayor, that's all, I apologize, that's me talking a lot, and then if we're good with it, I know Mayor Clary and some others are here. Once we get to the new business, we'll kind of jump y'all's up to the front, so.
Well, that's what my request is.
Okay, then we
My
do it.
report, I would ask,
Do it
since
right
we've
now?
got some people, if
All
we
right.
move
Is everybody okay with
under
that?
appropriations, item number 7 up, under my report, and we
Yes, sir.
address that, we've got some folks here.
Could you please start it with us, Mr. Mayor?
I would be glad to. I had a good meeting, and I think Alderman Robertson was there, the mayor. And what we're trying to address, and we've been dealing with this for quite some time, is traffic signalization on Drake's Creek Road and New Shackle Island. And I can't remember the highway, but it's a state highway on 258. And basically, going through the MPO process, we've been appropriated about $500,000. The problem is $500,000 doesn't buy you as much anymore as it used to be. But when the state went out and looked at that, it's a very complicated intersection. It is in a lower area. The road would have to be ramped up. There would have to be turning lanes. There would have to be caution lights approaching the signalization. So really what it's done is driven up the price of the project plus inflation. So we're probably looking at 2.5 to, who knows, maybe even $3 million by the time the project gets done. But it's because of development and other things and just traffic in general has become much more dangerous. We've had numerous accidents there. And in fact, responding to an accident, we had EMS personnel that were injured. They were stopped with lights on and a car ran into the back of them. And I think 2 of our personnel was injured at an accident. So there's no question this needs to be addressed, but there's a way to address it. Now, if you look at what's been appropriated, and I think it's a great idea to go to partnership with the city of Hendersonville, but you're looking at probably an investment of $1 million or more per entity. Well, we don't need to do it that way. And this is a great way to appropriate enough money to do the study to make sure that we know what we're talking about. Mayor Clary and I and the other mayors will be working this through the MPO, and there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be coming their way, especially with this new Infrastructure Act that's been passed. So our goal is to work, to get this information, to work this through so we can get an 80% grant for the whole project and split the 20% match between the city of Hendersonville and the county. I think it's a very reasonable request. I think it's something that needs to be done. And I think by working together, we're going to be much more effective. And we've got our other delegation, our other city mayors behind us because we're working on projects all over the county. That's really the ask, and I think it's it's really irresponsible if we don't move forward with this.
Yes, sir.
So that's about all I can say. Mayor,
Mayor
you got
Claire,
anything
would you like
add?
to say?
I can't really add too much. This is not inside the city limits of Hendersonville, but we want to partner with the county because obviously it affects a lot of folks that live inside the city of Hendersonville. I have with me here our chairman of our capital projects committee, that's Eddie Robertson, our chief of operations, that's Jesse Eckroth, our public works director, and that's Sarah Locke, and then our fire chief, and that is Scotty Bush, and also Deborah Mager is helping us out sort of to weave our way and figure out what exactly we need to do. However, none of these people feel like they need to talk if y'all want to go ahead and discuss this in group.
Guys, this is $4,500 to get it going. Brian, motion, thank you, sir.
Well, also with that motion, Alderman Robinson, Mrs. Maggard, I mean, everybody's come to me. It's in my district, and I drive this road almost, well, I don't want to say every day, because I try to avoid because of the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit coming down. Drives me crazy. But that being said, it is a very critical point when you come out of that road because the road lifts up onto the highway and there's no lights, there's nothing. You're coming around a blind turn, so I think this is definitely a thing that we have to take on and get corrected out there. 27 accidents, I believe. Is that what we had? So I mean, it's definitely in our face and we need to address it.
So it's $4,500 for the study?
Yes, ma'am. And Paul,
Seconded.
Commissioner Good seconded it for us.
I'll second it. Can I say?
Absolutely, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I can't echo, I just would echo Mr. Stewart. And I know when we first started asking Shackle Island, was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, to start asking the volunteer fire departments to keep a record of what was going on. At that time, I don't know if it's the same today, but I remember the fire chief at the time saying they had more calls because of that intersection as they do the rest of their entire area. I do drive it almost every day because I live off New Shackle, and it's a disaster. I mean, it's a miracle to God that more people are not hurt there. So I think the feasibility study is an absolute no-brainer to at least give us the direction on what the next step needs to be.
Any more discussion from anybody?
So it's a $9,000 study
Yes, ma'am.
initially, so the request is for $4,500.
Funding from
Okay,
county.
Mr. Foster, yes, sir.
I just have a
Yep.
question, Mr. Chairman. I'm all for this project. I work traffic every weekend on that nearby. So I was just wondering if anybody had an update on where the state of Tennessee stands with the widening of New Shackle project. If this would be taken into consideration.
Jamie, have you got anything? Or, I'm sorry, Mayor Clary.
Let's go to Public Works Director.
They don't have an active widening project in that section of New Shackle.
I thought that was been on their plan, their state plan for a while.
I can speak to it.
Go ahead, Paul.
No?
It was number 10 on their list before the 386 expansion. There's also an expansion, and 386 moved up. And Mayor, if I'm off on that, let me know, because I remember Jimmy it used to be number 10 on their list, because also on that list is to make Long Hollow Pike at least turning lane. But it's way down the list with the 386 now.
It's not gonna happen anytime soon.
Yeah, most importantly is fixing that intersection.
The main priority, and Jamie knows this, and it goes under construction, the first phase of 386, supposedly in 2024. That's really fast tracking it. And with the way the county's growing, major priorities, widening 386, 6-laning I-65 from Gillisville all the way to Kentucky State Line and Portland bypass. And that's where all the money's getting sucked up. If you look at that, that's $2.5 billion. So we can do projects like this, but to go in and widen state highways like Long Hollow Pike or New Shackle Island Road, they're way down the priority list. Because there's only so much money to go around, and we have to prioritize what we need, and those are our major traffic arteries in the county, and they've got to be addressed. So, I mean, that's kind of the way we are. You have to prioritize. There's not enough money to do everything.
Any more discussion?
Can we put the funding source general fund?
Yes, sir. Nuts and bolts. Sorry about that, David.
Make sure we get in the minutes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
Really,
Thanks.
I get to leave the meeting before 7 p.m., but we're probably gonna leave.
Yeah, that's why we moved you up there. As much as people enjoy watching the county financial stuff, I get it. So, and Dennis, Aaron was withdrawn there, so if you were here for that part.
Jessica, can you go ahead and hand out the COVID-19
Okay.
stuff?
Yep.
I wasn't sure.
No, hand me some of it, and I'll hand it down this way, that
Okay.
way you don't have to walk around.
And again, like I told the budget committee, I apologize, this is gonna be kind of a longer meeting than usual, but we need to get a
I'll
few
pass it
things
this way.
done.
Kind of tell from that.
Oh, okay.
Later, Jesse. See y'all.
Did I get everybody?
Legal? Do we have a-
Yes.
If you let me say a couple things off script, and I'll go home.
Okay, Mr. Hinton, why don't you do that?
Do you want to go down, I think he's wanting to look at
Yep, go.
item E. Can we move item E up?
Go ahead, Mr. Hinton.
Can we move item E up?
Yes,
That's
sir,
what he's
please.
here for.
Uh-huh.
What I want to happen, when all this is over about the library discussion, when we vote on budgets at budget time, and those are presented in black and white, each one of us has a responsibility, whether we live up to it or not, go through those budgets and determine whether or not we can agree or tolerate the numbers that are in those budgets. But when we leave there that night, and there's 13 votes, it's always been my impression that those numbers are locked. That's concrete numbers. No matter who you are, who gets a budget, whatever, that's the end of the discussion. Now, there's one alternative to make adjustments, and that's this body right here that's sitting in front of you. You come here and explain why it's necessary to take money from wherever, patrol cars and our deputies, or whatever it might be. And I know that the people that are elected by popular vote have to live with those kind of rules. The people that have to answer to the voting public has to live with those kind of regulations. And I'm dumbfounded by the fact that, finding out now that that's not the case. That I can't comprehend that money's being spent without even a line item for it.
No,
And, okay.
let me go through the details and what a lot of the confusion is.
Let me just leave it there. I'm fixing to get up and go home. But that's, all I want to do is tell you where I'm going to be at, consistently and forever. If you put it in that budget and you present it, and this body approves it, 13 commissioners vote to approve it, and you get it back, that's the law. You don't have money other than, unless you get grants, unless there's other provision for somewhere. But whatever that money is earmarked for is where it has to go without a re-trip through the commission.
Now, this is some of the confusion, and this policy right here will actually handle the issue. What Mr. Hinton's concern is certain things are presented in the budget that can be moved without the committee. And kind of go through the thing. An appropriation requires the approval of the full county commission by statute. If it's a major category such as sheriff, county building, jails, that requires the county commission. Object codes are addressed and they require the approval of this body, except for you allow me under the commission your authority to move them during the month to keep things moving. What we also have is what's called optional fields. Under the state statute, we're required to follow the state uniform chart of accounts, and I'm instructed to create a state uniform chart of accounts that complies with. The optional codes are not addressed anywhere. So the only way to really address them was with the policy. The optional codes is the sub-fund, cost center, location, and projects. The cost center would be the department. So for many years, we had separate departments for the library, so they were presented in the departments separately. Since these codes are optional, the libraries have asked to move them, and what I've told the library, since they're not a fund, major category, or object, I really have no authority to stop it. But with the way the statute is on following the uniform chart of account, the county commission can adopt policies for the optional codes. If you adopt a policy, and that's what this policy basically says, is these 4 optional codes, sub-funds, cost centers, locations, and projects, that if these are adjusted, they do have to go to the budget committee now. That would, if they're in the original budget or if they're in a subsequent appropriation. It doesn't say, in other words, we have some locations and stuff that's never shown to the commission, it wouldn't cover those. But this is anything that's shown to the commission in the form of an appropriation or a budget. And that was the concern that Mr. Hinton brought to me, that he had voted for an original budget that shown these, but now they have been moved without any committee or, I guess, really a good record of where they've been moved to at this
At
point.
the end of the year, if you go get a budget that's been handled the way these are gonna be handled, you won't even recognize it. I mean, it's possible that you won't even, that you can say, this is not what I voted for. This is not what I approved with 16 votes or whatever at the county commission, and gave them this budget, and it looks nothing like the budget we approved 8 months ago. Now, there's something wrong with that system, and I've been down here forever, but I'm just now stumbling into this fact, I guess, that people don't have to go with their budget
Right.
if they choose not to.
And the reason in the past it was never done that way is there was, is it 5 different or 4 different now? 5, I think, but different libraries that all have MOE, so money was never moved between the different departments.
Okay.
Since the budget, or since the library board has combined them, they move between them. But if you adopt this policy for them to move between the locations or in an appropriation, that it would require approval of the committee, but this would need to go to county commission, so. If they adopt the policy, that will handle what Mr. Hinton's concerned about. Is the
Y'all
gist of
think
it.
about it. 13 votes will do it.
That's not
So this policy does not currently,
Exists, no.
If y'all are.
If you adopt it, you can
Yeah.
send it on to county commission, and then from that point forward, those codes
Well,
would.
wait a minute,
question.
you
Is-
can't just make your point run out. I mean, you must be down here
Is
and
this-
suffer through it
is
like the
this
rest of
just
us.
for the libraries, or
issues
is
No,
over.
in
That
general,
would be
that's-
anything in the original budget
Okay,
or
what
the,
about elected officials?
if they have they have to follow the state uniform chart of
Well, I know
accounts.
they have to follow the state.
What would it affect elected officials any different? There's a statute on the state uniform chart of accounts.
It wouldn't mimic, they don't. the
They still have to
state-
move
yeah.
object codes and follow those
Yeah.
budgets by statute.
Yeah, so it would,
So
the
unless we're
state
saying they're
official
exempt from
wouldn't
state
get- yeah.
statutes in some way.
I'm not saying that, David, I'm just trying to think of scenarios like with the sheriff's office where if they've got the money, let's say they run out of paper towels and they need to move money out
We
of
move
the
the
toilet
object.
paper line item.
We move the object codes as we've always done, and the budget approves it after the fact. Because according to our appropriation resolution and the statutes, they're not supposed to exceed those. Now, does that happen if you run out of electricity? Are we gonna shut your electricity off? No. But the same thing is to be said is those are object codes that are addressed under state statutes already. These aren't those. These are the ones such as the different locations for the libraries, or animal control's got its own
But
project.
I was gonna say,
ECC.
what happens if they have to move somebody from the jail to animal control?
Then the thing is, it's a project, and the thing is, that's kind of Mr. Hinton's concern. If you're saying you've got $150,000 in animal control and you suddenly move it over to the jail, that's a different budget than what he's approved in appropriation. And those are optional codes, and you can adopt
But
that.
see, and I guess what I worry about that is, you know, what happens if, and this is a very real issue, is what happens if they are so short-staffed at the jail, they have to take a couple of people from animal control and
They
move
pay them out of the jail. That wouldn't, that wouldn't do anything. I mean, because
Looking
if
at
we're paying them from
everything,
the jail,
yeah.
they're paid from the jail. They won't, if they're paying them from animal control, they're misclassifying those individuals anyway.
But,
Yeah, I don't think
Leah,
that's really
I mean,
the-
here's the way I've always operated. They can go throw me in jail, but the bottom line is this, there's certain things you have to repair. And if I don't have it in the budget, and I'm just gonna say, boiler blows up at the jail, there's no heat.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't have anything in jail and courthouse maintenance,
It's an emergency.
I just go on and fund it. Because in the end, we don't have any other choice.
Right, and I
mean,
guess that's what I'm worried about.
We don't have a
is
choice.
But you don't
So-
have an emergency
So
on the
if
other
the
end.
sheriff had an emergency and, God forbid, something happened and a bunch of tailors got captured by Russia or something, they're in jail. And so, you know, we don't have any personnel.
Those Russian terrorists there.
He could pull any personnel he wanted to and do anything he wanted to because we don't have a choice. We have to, by state
And-
statute,
and I guess-
operate
and
the
I guess-
jail.
and
We
I
pay
guess
out of the
that's
jail.
my-
So-
I guess that's my concern, because, you know,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about things, because like,
There's some stuff that we still have the exigent rule
I
for.
mean,
I guess,
Right.
The county commission controls the money up to a
Right.
certain point, but then when it crosses that line, then we're constitutional office holders. We have to make it work.
How many times have we
And so-
turned off utilities? Never.
Never.
How many times have we not paid somebody under wage an hour? Never.
Go ahead,
I
That's
mean,
kind of what-
they only can go so far.
But that's that's
And I
concern.
guess those are the weird things that come in my head, because like I said, we have wage hour questions every day that come up.
But the
We have
jailer one would
staff
be,
shortages
the
every day.
jailer one wouldn't work that way, because if he's going
See,
to
Mr.
pay.
You better not leave.
He'll pay him out of the jail, he'll pay him out of the jail
I'd
major
say,
category. It
if,
won't be.
Brian, go ahead real
position.
quick.
Well, barring Russians taking our people captive and things like that going on, you said we don't have, or just correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm new to the committee and I'm learning here, but as far as an emergency fund, do we not have an emergency fund for each particular?
No.
No, there's no such thing.
We have like a courthouse and jail maintenance fund that has a set amount. We have, in county buildings, a set amount of courthouse and jail, but if something huge happened, it could run the whole thing over. Generally, what happens is we adjust the line items, we pay for them and come back to the commission because we know we don't have enough money for the rest of the year. But occasionally, we've had it happen in May and June, and very large things has happened that if you didn't do it, you would shut down the jail, the building.
But you can't legally shut down. the
Right,
jail.
so we had to go
Brian,
ahead.
the only wiggle room-
Even if
yeah.
there's no money in jail and
We have to
courthouse
do it.
maintenance, and something happens, and it happens frequently,
Oh, yeah.
then I just authorize the expenditure, and it has to come back here, and you really have no other choice, you have to fund it.
And a lot of times Anthony will call me and say, hey, we've got to do this.
I'll
budget
give
change. Yeah.
everybody notice I
Yeah.
can,
But-
but, I mean, you just have no choice.
Well, I just go back to like what we were talking about before, like with the fencing at the jail, things like that, things that we knew needed to be done, or what have you. Why
That comes
couldn't
back
that
here.
just been taken care of, or whatever?
Well,
not an
it
emergency.
wasn't an emergency.
These are emergencies where something's torn up and going to be risked.
Is
to
everybody
individuals or
okay?
services.
What I'd like to do is just send it to the full commission. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
So Mr. Hinton can leave. Do we need to pass
To the full commission.
Here's
And
what-
and that was
I'd
my
like to-
question to
yeah.
Leah. We think it can go straight to the
Yeah.
commission without.
We'd like to
going
send
to-
this to the full commission, that way everybody can talk about it and just decide.
Okay.
It's one of those, I don't think we should say yes or no to it. I think everybody should have the opportunity because it impacts the way we vote on everything. You know, everybody
And-
votes on the budget, so.
And nobody, to my knowledge, don't understand that when you have an emergency, all rules flop. You go to do whatever you have to do to get it handled. That's not what I'm talking about by any stretch of the imagination. I'm talking about when you get a pre-planned budget and get it approved for 12 months, then it'll last 12 months. If something comes up, that adjustment's gotta be made, there's a protocol for doing that, and that's y'all first, and then the county commission. Because the county commission has passed it, so the county commission ought to be the one who adjusts it, because they set it to start with. I'm not even fond of a committee being able to adjust it. That if it's a line item, if it's from the jail to the cars, or from the road department, we go through that all the time, moving stuff to the road department.
And I'm fine with that, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, I
really
don't have a
am, and I've
problem with that.
operated fine for years. But here, I will say this, don't button it down so tight that these people who are trying to, you have a different role. I've been a commissioner. The people who are trying to make things operate on a daily basis, they gotta have a little leeway.
Sure they
If you
do.
have none.
Sure they do.
And you button it down so tight, for everything you do, you gotta go to the county commission and wait a month for funding, that doesn't work. So just remember that, and I'm not against what you're doing, I'm really speaking in favor. Just remember, don't button it down so tight that people can't do their jobs.
And I
Because in the end, it will not work out well.
And I wasn't aiming to even say anything about this, but an additional employee has been hired for the library system. There was no budget for that person. There was no line item for that person. And that money has already been taken from somewhere else and used to hire a new employee since the change was made. Now, you ought not be able to do that, not in the budget that you're called upon to live for this year.
Everybody okay voting to pass it on the full commission?
David, I'm sorry, because I am just a little bit confused.
Okay.
We have a process today that brings most all reallocations or reappropriations through the budget committee. And then this is, what's that?
Online transfer.
Right.
Right.
You
And
have
so this
some-
proposed policy, does this bring 10 times as many changes to the budget
There's only
committee? Or is this, This
There's a-
is really just capturing this.
There's a few places it would affect if you want to adjust it, but most of those would be an issue if we adjust them anyway. Number one, it would affect the cost center departments. The only place that's shown in the original budget or an appropriation is in the libraries. It would affect if you wanted to move between sub-funds, but we don't do that anyway. The only place we use a lot of sub-funds is in your capital projects. They're used for local, bonds, and state grants. It won't be happening anyway. The other place they're used is your self-insurance, health, dental, and OJI/liability. We won't be doing that anyway. They did in the past, but I have questions of how it was done in the, Lee never did like what they did. I don't agree with what happened many years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's
I just want to make
questionable.
sure that we're not, to Anthony's point, I think that there is a transparency question about what has recently transpired within the library system. I think Mr. Hinton's point is valid and addressing that. I just want to make sure that
In
we.
a nutshell, Mr.
got
Hinton's
that.
full concern is, when he sees something in the original budget, he thinks it should go through a committee or the commission with a good record and an approval to change it. Right now, there's some things that we show in there just for accountability, the sub-funds, which we're not gonna move anyway, the locations for animal control is another one. But that's just in Anthony's county buildings, which we never move between, and it's over in the sheriff's department.
And
But it'd be
David,
sort of easy to move.
What about the clerk's offices? Or if somebody's in juvenile and they get moved to criminal, is that gonna be a location fund that there's gonna be?
If it's a major category, it requires county commission, but if it's an object, it goes here, but we don't use the locations and stuff like that. We use internal locations, that's why this specifically says anything shown on a budget or an appropriation. And we're gonna start removing those locations off your appropriations, because we're only gonna put them in there in the report, because they are in the coding, but the commission doesn't approve that Dennis's budget's here. But what his concern was, the original budget specifically says Hendersonville, Gallatin, Portland, Westmoreland, and is it Millersville? And now it's been combined without it going through a committee.
It's
That's
mainly
the
just been
gist.
the library.
And
And
we,
I understand that, and I agree with that. I'm just,
And that's
like I
why.
said, my concern is, what happens when we get an enormous healthcare bill from somebody in the jail? And, how,
Those are-
are we?
but
those are
They
in the
always bring those
self-insurance
anyway.
fund in the major categories anyway. That's the
But-
same operation it's always been.
But everything the sheriff has, he usually always brings us
The-
anyway.
You talking about one of the big healthcare bills from like the state board bills?
Mm-hmm.
We pay that through the regular line, and then it comes through this committee, and it always has to.
Okay,
it's
because a
the-
lot of times I negotiate down to 35% with the understanding that I'm gonna pay it that week.
That's an appropriation with, let's put it this way, if he's gonna overrun his major category adjust, that requires county commission's
Well,
approval.
I
as it
realize,
says. If he's gonna move an object other than
Lee, you'd still be
non-service,
fine doing that.
it's the same, it's not really
Yeah.
changed any of that.
I know.
that's.
Yes, I know where you're going. Yes,
I-
you'd
I
still be
can-
able to do the
when
things
I
you need
can-
to do.
When I can say, hey, we'll pay you right now if you'll take 35%.
If you've got the money in the
Yeah.
budget, it'll be as it always was. If you don't have the money in the budget, then it's always as it was, it's an
Okay,
issue.
well then, here's another example of something that I've had asked of me. In the clerk's offices, sometimes they move between, they'll have like maybe 2 full-time employees and they make them 3 part-time employees.
They've got to bring that to this committee as they've
Yeah,
always
so
had
that
to.
always goes back
And
here.
they've always got to have a salary agreement or salary suit to do that too.
Okay.
So there's
I'm
two or
just-
three
like I
things.
said,
If they do that,
I'm thinking
Leah-
about questions I've had in the last.
Well, that
couple of
particular question means it always had to come to this committee and always had to have a new salary agreement with the county mayor.
Well, I'll put it this way, in the 3 years we've been doing budget, we have not approved any new employee that this committee and the full commission didn't approve, but the libraries have done it now.
Okay.
And they're hiring more employees, and that they didn't have FTEs, they're creating new FTEs, which
I
we've always
don't
approved
think,
here.
I don't think they've created new, I think they're moving positions from one library to the other, because we count the FTEs. If you create a new FTE,
Yeah.
it requires insurance and, more insurance. If you do that, that's the number one way
Yeah,
that I
that's
will
the
send you
big
the
thing,
committee.
is the
Yeah.
That was the
insurance,
number
yeah.
one thing I'll send you the committee, to create a new FTE, because you don't have the money.
Yeah.
And we know you don't have the money. So that's not the issue. The issue here is they took positions from other libraries and moved them to non-libraries or between them. And the question is, where have they
Yeah.
been moved right now?
Every rule set in iron unless there's extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
But that's where we haven't created.
Let
these.
me just say this in synopsis, and I know what Larry's concerned about, and I appreciate that, but in the end, remember, these are one of the entities that has maintenance of effort. So there's only so much we're gonna be able to do.
Yeah.
Larry knows that.
The total overall is gonna be the same.
And so, I think in the end, I understand what he's saying, because that's not the way it was represented to. But Yet, when they present a budget, how are they gonna present their budget? And if they present a consolidated budget, how can you really tell them, we're not gonna do that? If they live within their maintenance of effort.
How you can tell them.
What's that?
13 public, how you can tell them.
Well, you could, but I'm
Yes.
saying though, how you gonna tell them how to segregate their budgets? I'm just saying, it's gonna be,
We're
it's
the
gonna be
funding
difficult.
body. When it comes to money, we can tell them anything we
Well,
want to.
you can.
We don't set library policy, but we set money policy.
That's
Everybody
true.
good moving it on? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
For tonight.
Night, Mr. Henry. Okay.
Number one is just an update on the American Recovery Plan. Me, Mr. Holt, and Ms. Norfleet met with the consultants and sent several of the projects. And as mentioned earlier, we're going to meet with Mr. Taylor and the group next week and bring forward some more projects. Number two is the COVID-19 hazard pays, and these are all handed out on everybody's desk. If we look, these are the totals, and there's only one of two sources or a couple of actions we could take at this point, take them out of the general fund or actually decrease salaries. What I'm asking the committee to do is to authorize me for all of them that are eligible, and we send them down to the consultants. They should be getting back shortly to verify eligibility, and some of them are clear, some of them aren't. It's allow me to claim anybody that's eligible for the COVID-19
There's some
risk
caps
supplement
on it,
to
so
the American
we might hit
Recovery.
that.
Right, there's actually caps. You can't make over 150% of the average income of the county or the state, whichever's higher, without justification. You have to generally be in direct contact with individuals or the products, but there's some caveats. And you can't be over 25,000 total or $13 an hour. So we're verifying all those numbers and verifying all the requirements are met clearly. But what my request is, any of them that we determine are qualified, what I'm asking is authorization to claim them to the American Recovery Funds and to appropriate up to about $3 million.
Yeah.
So moved.
It's my second.
Good. No, go ahead.
I'm in favor of this. Just clarification, my understanding, City of Gallatin had decided to use these funds for hazard pay with similar categories of employees,
They
right?
have, it's what I've been, I'm not
Have
privy
you
to
seen
all
any of the
things.
other municipalities
I don't
going this route?
know, but look, here's where we're at. Let's just stop and take a snapshot of where we're at. We're either gonna have to fund this out of the general fund, or we're gonna fund it with these COVID funds. And it's kinda like Scott Langford said earlier. Remember what we've got coming online. Facebook, the first building is getting ready to come online. They'll be the third largest taxpayer in the county when that happens. When their second building goes online, they'll be the largest taxpayer. We had no choice. And let me say this again.
We're getting ready to shut down
We had no
ambulances.
choice. We can shut ambulances down and have people die. That's ridiculous. So we have to fund this, and we all know that. And we had to do it across our first responders. And it really was effective. It stopped the bleeding. You can talk to Greg Miller, you can talk to our director at the ECC. It has actually enabled us to hire people and regain lack of staff.
Correct.
And so that has been very effective. And you know, it may come up on the county commission, but remember, you've got two choices. Well, three if you wanna commit suicide. Defund it, which is idiotic, or take it out of the general fund, or use these COVID funds. And it's just, it's a no-brainer.
And if you've been watching the paper, you can see what's going on down in
Yeah,
Wilson
Wilson.
County. And I dare say we probably made theirs worse when we raised ours by getting employees.
Well, I know.
But we're in good shape now. That helped us
We're all
though.
fighting for a limited.
But it helped us though, that's what I'm
Well,
saying.
we've got to keep us operating.
Yeah.
I can't run Wilson County.
But I'm saying that helped us and that's
Yes,
why
sir.
we're not in the
Yes,
sheriff.
sir.
More than likely, some of this will have to come out of the general fund.
Yeah, at some point, some of them are,
At some
yeah.
point.
Well, we can
We'll
say
find out
right
how much,
now,
though.
we can say right now, the Sheriff's Department and ECC will have enough. When we move what we can out of EMS, if it's approved, we think the EMS will have enough for theirs. Because they had savings last year of about
I will
four.
tell you this, we've got enough funds in these funds, as long as we don't get down to
Yeah.
an empty tank, to take care of us during this period. And after then, I really, and David, you tell me if I'm not being conservative, I really believe with some of the things that we have coming online, they will pick up the slack and fund this easily.
I think we need to do this because we really have no, it's our best option. I think number two, we slow walk the budget next year as far as looking at all the costs. But I think with Facebook coming online and some of the other things we've seen and the sales tax growth and the things, we're gonna pick up a lot of it over the next couple of years.
Now, that means a lot, because this
I know.
guy is about as conservative as you get.
All in favor?
And we're gonna look at the numbers in a minute while I think they.
Any opposed? All right, passed unanimously.
On
Go
the
ahead,
screen here, and I know it's a little small, we passed out some stuff. If you can just go to the second page, Jessica. And boy, it's blurry for me. There we go. Go down to the bottom and show them the bottom number where we're conservatively estimating. That is on our local taxes. A lot of it will go to the debt service and the schools, but overall, we're seeing a pattern like that. We have actually picked up a lot of what we've lost in COVID, and we are doing much better than we conservatively thought, and this is where we're conservatively at. A couple of things are really helping us is the property tax collections last year was almost 98%. Amazing. We budgeted in this year higher than last year, but nowhere near the 98 still, so this is not even capturing 98. Sales tax, because of the changes in the sales tax laws, inflation, unfortunately, and several other things, we're doing really well. Building permits doing well, and we were very conservative on adequate facilities tax, so we're doing good to budget. And we were conservative because last year a lot of us know they're building Facebook buildings. We're not going to see those again, so I budgeted less than last year. But overall, our revenues were looking really good and appear to be bouncing back.
And the courts are kind of evening out over.
And Lee probably knows more about that than us on the courts. They're opening up pretty well.
We're
There's a
opening.
lag on them, and then I don't think we want to see the numbers we did in the past because of an unfortunate change in law about driver's license, but that's just something we kind of plan for anyway.
But beer
Yes, sir.
tax is down.
Beer tax is down, and I think, I don't know, because I think maybe they drank more beer because they were trapped in the pandemic is the only thing I can figure, because the beer tax has been a consistent growth revenue. But one thing I do want to do is talk to the state to make sure there's not some issue of it being, because I don't know of any large changes. I mean, there would, nothing large is moved out of
Sports
the county.
betting?
Huh?
Does
The sports betting's gone.
does that number, does it change, or we end up behind on anything this year since the tax cards just went out this week?
But they've been, okay, I talked to the trustee, they've been collecting taxes, but it did slow it down. Our cash flows are good. We're really strong on
I
cash
mean,
flows.
there's a lot of people that just know normally and have come in and paid, even though.
Well,
And your mortgage is paid
I
too.
will say this, and I don't want to get political. I'm not running for office, and I'm staying out of all that. I've got 9 more months after this, and I'm retiring. But our tax notices are supposed to go out in October. I've had a lot of people calling me. I haven't even approached this subject because then it turns political and people start pointing fingers. But I have had a lot of calls.
Well, that's why I asked.
And to this date, no one that I know of has received, I haven't received any, the county tax notices.
I got mine
They
Friday.
came yesterday.
Friday.
I got mine
Okay,
Friday.
that's good. Today is what day, Billy? The 6th.
They were mailed on.
Now, the problem there's one problem with that, and I'm not gonna get into whose responsibility it is, but I know it doesn't come out of the commission, and it doesn't come out of the county mayor's office. The problem with that is, we're losing revenue. Now, they have all the way to February to pay those, but any day, even as low as interest rates are, that we can collect those revenues and put them in the county coffers, we're making money.
Yes.
And so most people, yes, mortgage companies will pay them, but most people will not pay their property taxes until they receive a notice. That's just a fact. So that's something, and I'm not pointing fingers, we need collectively to do a better job, because that's costing the taxpayers of this county money. And it's just not, it's not the way to do things. Now, I've got some property in other counties, and I've received their tax notices in a timely manner. And that's all I want to say.
Yes, sir. David?
And can say I don't know them either, so, or can do anything about it. The next is the Highway Public Works Fund Analysis. One thing to note is it's been very positive each month, looks very good. One thing to note, and I was looking at this when we were doing our bond rating with S&P, gas taxes never decreased for the county because of the change in the law, but the change in the law actually fell out last year and didn't affect it, but it was still positive. So this county, by and large, went through the pandemic a lot better than average. The next one, the financial statement memo, it usually tells you it's gonna be available the night of the commission. This one actually says it'll be available the third Monday. The reasoning is we won't receive some of the underlying data to close the books in time to actually have it that night, but it will be available to the commissioners on that night. And,
Jump into new
Budget
business,
calendar
brother.
that you
and,
made.
Oh, yeah.
oh, did we ever get a actual for B, did we actually get a, approval for that, to claim to it and send it on the commission?
Yes, everybody's, yeah.
I'm sorry. I
We've got-
wasn't
Yeah,
on.
no, you're
We
good.
didn't have to
Sorry,
post
I
that
missed that
revenue
one,
analysis.
Okay, and then the next one is the private access by January 1st, that the finance director and the budget committee will set the calendar. As I've done in the past, I've always just requested the committee, we follow the same procedures and calendars as last year, as close as they fall, as long as they fall on a weekday or move them as close as we
We're all
can.
good with that one, aren't we?
Can't
And
wait.
we will need to vote on that one.
We do?
Yeah, I
All
think
right,
so.
all in, I make the motion. Second. Thank you, sir. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, David.
And that is the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
New business?
Motion group approved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Oddly enough. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, IT, Dennis finally got a bid for putting the better speakers out in the hall that will connect with the service. And this one's not $150,000, it's right at 20,000. He said he's got that, he's ready to move forward if we want to, so go ahead, Jeremy.
Does this address the speakers in the chambers that the citizens in the audience cannot hear?
Yes.
It's supposed to, yeah, he said it's
Back,
supposed to take care of
yes.
everything, and also out into the hallway too.
And
So-
those speakers, by the way, Commissioner, has not been changed since 1990.
I'm in full agreement with that.
They're very- I
So
agree.
moved.
All right, second from,
Hold
Stewart.
on, let's
Oh,
get,
yeah.
did the owl get Jeremy saying he's in agreement with something?
Well, local capital projects for funding, is that good?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, any discussion? I've got you down as a second, Brian. Oh, yeah, don't
Thank
worry
you.
about that. If I see a hand go up, we're writing it down.
She was asking earlier, so I was like,
No, no, no.
Well, I didn't hear you that time, so.
Yeah, no, this time you're allowed to.
I can speak.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously, thank you.
Number two, you go through it.
Yeah, actually, what I was gonna say is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Motion group approved.
Yes, sir. Second. And then if there's any discussion needed before, all right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We've already done number 7. Then you doing C for the nonprofit allocation panel discussion?
Yep, the proposal is summarized in
This
there.
one is long as libraries.
Nope, I'm just, this is. No, you don't get one, never mind. Anyway, I'm just sharing for informational purposes if anybody's interested in how this fund has continued to evolve. In summary, we had allocated $100,000 for our nonprofit charitable organizations this year. We had some agencies that were not able to apply, different situations, definitely.
What number?
Surprised, yeah. A little disappointed, but at the same time, it does reflect what's happening. You know, staffing issues are affecting every industry, including these nonprofits. So in some cases, the agencies just aren't even able to function. So probably the one I'm most concerned about, but hopeful that they've got plans to move forward is Westmoreland Seniors. So we don't have any money allocated for them this year because they don't have a building where they're meeting. They don't have anybody. They're not really working with their seniors right now, but they are regrouping and they plan to be back with us next year. So
Did you want to
Mr.
include an
Chairman.
increase on that then? So
we'll
that we-
have to address it next year.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Addressing that, I know how that works. I respectfully request that we allocate the money and only appropriate the money if they're ready to receive it. Because if you cut these seniors'
Yeah, they'll never
budgets, they'll never recover. And I think it's one of the premises, the most important premises of why we do these nonprofits, that and volunteer fire, because they're really not a nonprofit. You've moved that around, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm asking you not to remove that from the budget, to keep it in. It doesn't mean that we have to appropriate it, but I think it's important that we budget it. And it's not a very large amount anyway.
it would be, what, the number I just gave you, or the spreadsheet I just passed around, did you guys share that or?
Commissioner DeWitt, did you want to put out the number you're hopefully that we're going to be able to go for this year in budget hearings? Just so it's in the minutes and we got it.
Give me 2 million.
Yeah, like $5,000, $5,500.
Well, no, what, each year since we
Yeah,
started
last-
doing this, she's kind of said, hey, I'd like to increase it by this much, so that way as we prepare for budget stuff, we know, hey, this is what we're trying to shoot for this year.
Right.
So,
And the reason, yeah, I would say that this year we allocated 100,000. The proposal that you have in your packet is 81,750 total. It does not include what last year we gave to Westmoreland seniors was 5,500. You know, if they are able to apply, and come alongside and, you know, be part of this process, I think it would be beneficial to reserve that money for them, if they are able to come back. Definitely had multiple conversations in hoping that they could, and then they just didn't feel that they were able to organize to even ask for money at this time.
Well,
So, but I don't want it to go away, and that's where
agree.
this analysis is something I
just
want to
think
keep
it's
part of the
going to be a
minutes.
lot of fallout. There's no need of, $5,500 is going to seem like an inequity, and I just don't think it's worth your grief. I just think that you need
I
to
don't think
hold that
anybody
money
disagrees with
aside
you, Mr. Mayor.
and allocate it in the budget, and if, you know, we gotta have a good reason to appropriate it, but they've been on our nonprofit list forever. And I just, that's not exactly a powerhouse of wealth in that community. And, you know, we can't run their senior citizen center, but
We can help them get it up.
Yeah, if they come
Exactly.
forward.
That's right.
If they get it
Yep.
together, yeah, it's a different.
All right, absolutely.
So these other,
Go right
I'm trying to
ahead.
squeeze out of turn.
No, you're good, jump in there.
So the other ones like the Grace Place, I love Grace Place. I mean, there's so many good ones on here.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of new ones this year, and we did create some room in the budget this year to do that, to invite agencies that had maybe previously received funding or never received funding from the county to be part of this process. So we have a lot of new agencies, but most agencies did not ask for increases, which I thought some of the budget that we allowed for would have accommodated that, but they didn't. And again, then we had some agencies that just couldn't, that didn't initially organize enough to apply, where I think it's indication that there's other agencies out there that would have liked to have, but it just didn't have the bandwidth or the staff support to be able to apply. So I would look to continue to keep this budget
At 100
at
at least?
100, or increase it by whatever the standard rate that we use in budgeting the
Well, it's kind of
departments.
what y'all
Commissioner
think.
DeWitt, I think you've done an amazing job. This is a big difference in what happened in the past. I've seen, and you've been here, Paul, and seen some of these nonprofits getting literally beat up.
Brian, if you want to, what we want to do is if we want to increase it, we like to say, hey, look, whatever the number is, just say it, and then what we'll do is when we do the budget process in May, we'll start trying to actually work with the goal of, hey, we try to know all the things we've got to do off the top first, like increasing employees, wherever it might be, and that's one of the things we factor in. So certainly, if you would like to bring that up, we don't vote on it right now, but it gives us an idea of what we need to work towards.
I just think it's, you know, with Sumner County, and especially like how I'm involved, my office is involved with One Stop Realty, things like that. I mean, we are constantly giving back, and I think that's one of the things that people love about Sumner County is that we're always doing something good for somebody. So I don't see why the county, you know, on a whole, wouldn't support something like that to help people that are just less fortunate, you know, that need help. So, yeah.
Ms. DeWitt might have brought up once or twice how much our county does for nonprofits versus other counties. And
We shared more detailed analysis with you separately, because you did not get that in the timing that you came to the commission. But,
Right.
We had a gap to
Brian,
close.
you're right on task with somebody else sitting at this table.
I think I might know who.
So we'll make an amendment to what's proposed in here. It's, as I said, it was 81,750 is what is the grand total of the 3 pages if you go through your budget packet. So if we amend that to include an additional 5,500 on reserve for Westmoreland, so it's appropriated but not yet allocated.
I appreciate that.
So we'll just put
Does that
it
make
in,
sense?
we'll just put it in the budget, but we won't advertise it. That way it'd have to be advertised and go back to committee before we could pay it.
So do we need a resolution for this today, I mean, for this month?
Yeah, there'll be a resolution, we'll say it to the 5,500 transfer, we'll do a
Okay, okay,
resolution.
we'll get that.
Yeah, because that
Okay.
way, in case they got it together too much from now, it's there, and they don't
We'll
have
just-
to wait till
But
the,
we won't advertise.
We'll just go ahead and put them in there, but we won't advertise them in the paper, and that way if they come back, they'll have to advertise in the paper, and probably the best thing is have our office email them and say they were appropriated, but they need to go back, I guess, and contact you because you're over the allocation
I'll-
committee.
I will definitely be back in touch with them. and-
Okay, we'll let
and
you
their
know
mayor
then.
and see.
so it'll be a
between
motion
them.
by Ms. DeWitt with a second by Mr. Stewart? Okay. Any discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Grinches? All right, no, we're good. Passed unanimously.
Love it.
All right, I'll bring this one up. David is not subject, like when we do COLA, but like when we've talked about doing an HR study and we evaluate the salaries in the departments and everywhere else, David does not fall under that because he has a contract with us. So I'm asking, his contract's in there, I'm asking that we include an additional 10% for him. And the reason I say that is over the past 2 years that I can think of, there's been the $3.5 million he saved us by recalling bonds and locking in things. And there's 100 different little things when we go through the budget process where he saves us money and is just smart about it. And I think it's well overdue. The only way we can do it is at this point when we renew his contract. There's no other time to give him additional money, just because of the way he's set up compared to others. Yes, sir? Yeah, Mr. Holt?
I'm gonna make a comment, and I'm gonna just tell all of you this.
He's about to cut your legs out.
I'm gonna destroy him. Tell on him. Now, here's the thing. We have, I think, the best finance director in the entire state. You'd be well advised
Metro's had 2 quit.
to keep David Long, because he is frustrating. If I had any hair sometimes, he'll make you jump through a bunch of hoops, and I've argued with him at times. But I'll tell you what, I sure as hell want him on my side because he does a fabulous job. If I were a commissioner, I'd be embarrassed not to vote for a contract and not to give him a raise because, and we have a great attorney too. And these are the only 2 professionals that we have under contract by the county commission. But I can't tell you what David's done for the county and
Well,
how he's helped us
We've gotten
navigate.
perfect audits. I mean, we've gotten a perfect
Well,
audit, which is.
I mean, we've never had
Impossible,
a
impossible.
You know, we have the best bond rating you can possibly have.
Yeah.
So, I
Well,
mean,
so,
there's a
we're
million
number 2 on the
support.
bond, we can't get through.
but it's
We're not
not
big enough.
anything that David didn't do, we just don't have the demographics yet.
Well, you can quit talking.
I know. I just
I
have
made
to
a
brag
motion.
on him.
All in favor?
Because you know,
No,
you
we
went
wanna make
through
sure
it.
this
Make
is
sure I get
recorded
the-
when he's
Mr.
feeling a
Mr.
little
Gamenon seconded it.
underappreciated.
Let me make sure they get the motion. Is it 10% on my existing current total salary?
I don't get greedy.
No, that's what I'm saying, too. Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, it's 10%
Only on the
contract.
interest of your, you're only on the interest of
Well, that's
yourself.
what, make sure, because I have 2 line items, make sure it counts.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
Hip hip hooray, or what are we supposed
All
to
right,
say?
All right, I pumped you
Well,
up.
thank you, Mr. Holt.
Check in the mail?
Mr. Chairman and committee.
We've already done number E, transfers, group and approve.
I think,
Motion.
no, you're on, you're on F, and then I think the
Oh,
sheriff was gonna drop that one already.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you. On that one, he is not wanting to hire another IT person,
Okay.
so thank you.
It'd only be item 2.
Yep.
So that, I'm taking that off the agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And there's nothing unusual in the transfers on item number 2.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just have a question real quick. On the, somebody had mentioned it earlier, and I can't remember who it was, but said Chief Miller had, he had said that we had significant applicants come into to EMS and everything. Do you have an idea of how many numbers?
Last time before we did the hazard pay, he had 10 openings, he had 0 applications. And he had 5 people getting ready to leave, that he knew were getting ready to leave because they came and said, hey, I'm sorry, I gotta leave. And then there were a few more he was worried about. Since we did the hazard pay, immediately all, the 5 people stayed, all 10 openings got filled, and he actually has a little bit of a waiting list now. And I talked to a guy in Nashville, we were at the uniform place, and he was leaving Metro to come back to Sumner County. And he had left about 1.5 years ago, and it was strictly money. And he said since the money's closer, he can afford it, and he definitely wanted to come back here because he still lived up here at the time, so.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, it has made a huge difference in all of our first responders as far as that goes. Tax refunds, nothing crazy, Ms. Dunn?
Nope.
I like that we're
$1.
gonna spend probably about $200 in man hours for that $1 we're giving back to somebody.
Yeah, I
So
didn't
we'll
want, you know, I have no
It is
control
what
over
it,
these.
yeah, it's government work, nothing we can do about it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you all, I apologize for running along like that.
Let's make a motion to
If you showed up
give,
on time, Mr. Chairman,